Boom! Yes, folks, Hume here again. But first of all, welcome. Welcome to the final video in our series, the election selection. This is the final video for analytical purposes. We may do a video subsequent to this. I may do a video subsequent to this when the EBC releases the final list of electors. At that point, we will be dealing with hard numbers now. We'll be delving into possible vote tallies and stuff. We'll move away from the percentages into the numbers. By the way, as I say percentages, I'm supposed to do a video explaining why I do percentages too. So at most, we probably have maybe about 2 more videos, maybe 2 or 3 more videos again. But as far as the electoral projections go, this is the final video. Alright, we are the #1 marginal seat in the country now, Moruga Tableland. The most marginal seat in the entire country, and I think by now everybody would have a sense of that. Alright, even without having done any calculations, I would have done the calculations, and yes, Moruga Tableland did come out at the top of the marginal constituency rankings, #1. Alright, and when we look at the graph there, you will see a particular feature that just further underscores Moruga's position at the top of the marginal rankings, marginal constituencies. Now, I like to make the projections before I do the discussions and the analysis. Alright, so I'm going to do that now for Moruga Tableland. Excuse, you see how much fufu I have to go through for Moruga Tableland. It's a special seat like that, right? My projection for Moruga Tableland, based on my analysis up to this point, is that it is too close to call. Literally too close to call. And I'm not using that as some kind of cop-out to avoid making a hard call, because as you will see in the graph itself, the trends themselves, sorry, you have to be careful with the English, the subject verb agreement, singular and plural, right? You get English in a maths video too, right? As you will see in the graph, even the graph itself is telling a story that Moruga Tableland is way too close to call, right? We might get trends on the ground, and as people analyze the seat a little further between now and the 10th of August, there will be certain kinds of information that people will pick up that will put them in a better position to maybe kind of lean the seat one way or the other between now and the election. But for my purposes, at this point, Moruga Tableland is too close to call. So we're going to go across in the graph now and check it out. Nice! So 2007 we start as always. Percentage wise, 2007, PNM 48%, non-PNM 50.2%. Close election. 2010, nationwide anti-PNM, anti-Manning sentiment. The non-PNM vote jumped from 50.2 to 60.3, and the PNM vote dropped from 48% to 45%. And then from 2010 to 2015, the Moruga Tableland vote jumped from 45 to 51.1, whereas the non-PNM vote dropped from 60.3 to 48.6. Point to note, Moruga Tableland is one of those seats where the PNM won in 2007 despite capturing an overall minority of the votes. So in other words, the split vote in the opposition ranks would have worked in the PNM's favor in Moruga Tableland in 2007. Let me just read off the figures. Right? The PNM voter tally in 2007 was 8,929, and the combined total for the UNC and the COP would have been 9,345. One of the parties would have gotten 7,908, the other party would have gotten 1,437. So in terms of the overall voter count, non-PNM versus PNM, the PNM would have lost Moruga Tableland by a total of 416 votes. All right, 416 votes separated the PNM from 416 votes. Yeah, 416 votes separated the PNM from the non-PNM coalition in 2007. All right. Of course, the margin was a lot greater in 2010 when we had the nationwide anti-Manning, anti-PNM sentiment. In that case, the PNM lost handily here by about 2,000, just about 2,000 votes thereabout. Actually, no, almost 3,000 votes. The PNM lost by, let me see, 3,000 minus 81 minus 20, it is how much? 53? 2,953 votes. Yeah, based on what I've seen here, 2,953 votes separated the non-PNM from the PNM in 2010. And then we swing back to 2015 now, where the PNM would have won 51.1% to 48.6%, and we know the voter difference there was 533 votes in 2015. All right, so again, I mean, Moruga Tableland as close as they could get. Now look at the trend lines. You have the yellow line on top, and you have the red line below, and you see the two lines converging towards each other, and they actually meet on the graph. So this is the only graph out of all the graphs that we would have looked at so far where the two trend lines actually converge at one singular point in 2020. And yes, my calculations, based on the equations here and using the trends, show more or less a 50-50 split for the UNC and the PNM. So in other words, from a graphical standpoint, you could see it. From a calculatorial, I'm not sure if that is a word, but I'm using it anyway. A calculatorial standpoint, it is there, right? Moruga Tableland is too close to call if we're making the call based on mathematical trends and statistical techniques. All right, so that is it where that particular analysis is concerned. We will go back to the whiteboard now and wind up with a nice little discussion to close the thing off. So, you see for yourself. You see for yourself. That graph is just, that graph tells the story just as well, or perhaps even better than anybody could do it, you know, verbally. All right. Moruga Tableland is too close to call for any of the two political parties. So this seat is more or less one of those seats where we expect to see a flurry of activity on both sides of the spectrum, because each side would be thinking that they have a real chance, a real chance of winning, right down until the last vote is counted on August the 10th, 2020. This is definitely one of those seats where if one family in a street decide not to vote, and if that happened in 10 or 20 streets over the course of the entire constituency, where that could be the difference between one party winning and one party losing. All right, this is one of the seats where if the people in a street or a particular neighborhood decide for one reason or the other that they don't like party X or party Y, or they don't like candidate X or candidate Y, that could make the difference between victory and defeat. And yes, we would have seen in the lead up to the election, on the PNM side of things, a certain level of disaffection, a certain level of conflict, where the selection, where the screening and the selection of the PNM candidate was concerned. We just have to wait and see if that now would manifest as fallout, where the PNM voter tally in the election of August 10th is concerned. All right. On the flip side, we also would have seen the inauguration of a couple much needed projects in the area. We saw the commissioning of the agro-processing plant, right, which is something that the people of the area would have been clamoring for the longest while. And we also saw the turning of the sod for the fishing facility in that particular area as well. So those are two things that we have to see how that would play out in terms of voter turnout for the ruling People's National Movement on the 10th of August 2020. Alright, now there is a particular dynamic that I want to mention as we get closer to the end of this particular video. In 2007, the PNM voter tally percentage rise in Moruga Tableland was 48%. In 2010, the PNM voter tally was 45%. So the percentage dropped from 48 to 45. And then in 2015, the percentage went up to 51.1%. So in the two elections under consideration where the PNM would have come out on the wrong end of the voter count in terms of getting a majority of votes, the PNM would have gotten 48% in 2007, 45% in 2010. Now, to only drop by 3% between 2007 and 2010. Remember, 2010 was in the middle of a nationwide anti-Manning, anti-PNM sentiment. So to only drop 3% within that period suggests a very, very, very strong and extremely loyal PNM base in Moruga Tableland. Alright, if they got 45% down from 48% in 2010, then there's a certain core there that not much could move, right? Now, that voter tally would have gone up from 45 to 51.1% in 2015. So in other words, there is a core of PNM support in the constituency. The remaining question that needs to be answered is whether that could translate into crossing the line into a majority. Now, the party was able to do it in 2015, right? In 2015, the party got a majority of support, right? Part of the reason for that, I would like to suggest, would be a dramatic fall off in the UNC support, because looking at the graph, you see that there seems to be much more variability in the UNC support in Moruga Tableland. So in terms of the percentages, in 2007, the UNC would have clocked 50.2%. Well, the non-PNM coalition. In 2010, the non-PNM coalition went up to 60.3%. So while their voter turnout jumped from 50.2 to 60.3 between 2007 and 2010, at the same time, the PNM voter percentage dropped off by just 3%. So you see a huge disparity there in terms of the relative movement between the two parties. Right? And then in from 2010 to 2015, the non-PNM voter count dropped from 60.3 to 48.6%, while the PNM voter turnout would have risen from 45 to 51.1%. So the non-PNM voter turnout would have dropped by, let me see, 60 minus 48 is 12, by 11.7%. And while the non-PNM vote was dropping by 11.7%, the PNM vote would have risen by just about 6%, 6.1%. So there is a significant disparity in the movement of votes on the UNC, a significant disparity, between the movement of votes on the UNC side and the movement of votes on the PNM side. That is a factor that we had to look at, because if it is that the PNM continues to hover around late 40s into early 50s, then that too could make the election even Well, not even. It will just continue the trend that we have already established. Remember, Moruga Tableland is in #1 in the marginal seats. All right. So the next question that needs to be asked, and only the people with knowledge of the constituency would be in a position to answer this: how many of the non-voters we could get to vote for the PNM? The PNM people will be trying to deal with that. The people on the UNC side will be just looking to drive their voters out, because for some reason it seems that when the UNC vote is motivated, you get a big increase. And then if you don't get that level of motivation in the UNC vote, as happened between 2010 and 2015, you have a very sharp fall off, and that would tend to favor the PNM. So do we have the conditions in Moruga Tableland that would generate disinterest in the UNC voters, that would generate a negative sentiment among the UNC voters, that may even see some of them flipping to vote for the PNM? I really don't see too much evidence of that here in this particular seat. The PNM vote just seems to be the PNM vote, and the UNC vote just seems to be the UNC vote. However, contrary to what most people think instinctively, where elections in Trinidad and Tobago are concerned, it is the UNC vote in Moruga Tableland that seems to be the most volatile, that seems to be the most fluid. There's a general perception that the UNC base is solid and that it comes out every time. What I am seeing here looking at these figures is that that is not always the case. There are certain seats like San Fernando West and St. Joseph where the people who would vote for the UNC in those seats show a much greater willingness to switch their vote to the PNM depending on the circumstances at the time. And then there are other seats like Barataria San Juan and Moruga Tableland where the UNC vote in those seats seem to be much less willing to vote for the PNM. They will simply just not show up. They just simply wouldn't go and vote. And when they do, when they refuse to go and show up, when they refuse to vote, that now is when you see the PNM actually gaining some kind of advantage. So in other words, in Barataria San Juan and in Moruga Tableland, whenever the UNC people, the UNC voters don't show up at the polls, that tends to favor the PNM. If the UNC could drive out their voters in Moruga Tableland in 2020, then the election might swing in the favor of the UNC. All right? So again, let me repeat that. There's a critical factor in Moruga Tableland. If the UNC could turn out their voters, the PNM might be in trouble in that seat. Unless, of course, the PNM might be in a position to tap into the new voters. So that is where we had to look now, because if the PNM could tap into a majority of new voters, that might serve to offset a possible increase in the UNC voter turnout if that happens. All right? We don't have too much non-voters to tap into because Moruga Tableland is one of those seats with an extremely high voter turnout. All right, so I have the figures here. Let me just read them off. In 2007, the voter turnout in Moruga Tableland was 73.5%. In 2010, the voter turnout in Moruga Tableland was 76.2%. And in 2015, the voter turnout in Moruga Tableland was 75.7%. So Moruga Tableland's position and reputation as the most marginal seat in the country is thoroughly and comprehensively deserved. We see a clear sense that the people in that constituency are engaged in the political process, that they actually come out to vote. All right? And yet, even in that situation, we find that there is a rock solid core of PNM support, and that there is a kind of fluid UNC base that could move or not move depending on what the prevailing sentiment is. All right. So I mean, Moruga Tableland is special. It's special. It's special in every way, shape, and form. It's a really, really nice analysis to look at in so many different ways. All right. So that is basically it. Again, just to repeat, I am not going to call Moruga Tableland either way. All right. You would have seen in the graph where the two trend lines actually converge and met. They actually touch each other on the graph. Right? So we're looking more or less at a 50-50 split. But, as we would have just discussed, there are certain other factors at play that, depending on how those factors swing, you might start to get a clear sense of the election leaning one way or the other in favor of the PNM or in favor of the UNC. So, with that having been said, my final tally for all 41 seats would be, with 40 seats being analyzed, with 40 seats being counted, I have the PNM at 22 and the UNC at 18, with Moruga Tableland as a literal toss-up. A literal toss-up. We just had to wait and see what happens. We have to wait between now and the 10th of August to get a sense of if and how the ground will shift. And then on the night of August the 10th itself, we will have to wait and see what will happen where Moruga Tableland is concerned. Alright, so of course, to wind up the video, I want to talk a little bit about my mathematics. Alright, about 2 or 3 years ago, I had the experience of getting a call from somebody. I think it was Moruga self, if I'm not mistaken. Either Moruga or Mayaro, somebody from that part of Trinidad, the southeastern part, south and southeastern. And they seem to have been showing some interest in coming to my class, but of course the distance was a factor. So very early, it took us about 2 or 3 conversations to decide, well, nah, this really wouldn't be able to work just because of the distance. Alright, and back then I would have mentioned to the person that I am working on and looking forward to putting up something online so that people in the far-flung regions of Trinidad, and I'm saying far-flung with the greatest of respect, because far-flung could mean different things depending on where you are. So if I am here standing up on the East West Corridor making this video, then far-flung is Mayaro or Moruga. If I am standing on Laloon Beach in Moruga, then far-flung is Sangre Grande, far-flung is San Fernando, far-flung is Port of Spain. Alright, so I have to be very careful, because you know how these things could be sometimes. You say something and you don't mean anything, but then somebody will take offense somewhere. And that is normal, it happens in life. We try to mitigate that, and whenever it happens, we apologize and we move on. So again, I use the word far-flung with the greatest of respect. I don't mean anything, people of Moruga Tableland. Alright, so yeah, what I was saying before I went there. Yes, I was telling the person that, yeah, I want to put up something online. That was about 2 or 3 years ago. Today in 2020, we actually have something. I'm actually in a position to say, yes, we have an online platform for my mathematics sessions that would be of tremendous benefit to people in the south part of Trinidad, in the southeastern part of Trinidad. Alright? Really good stuff. Alright? We have videos on a variety of topics. We have videos on topics to come. We will also have live Zoom sessions not too long from now. I just have 1 or 2 things to get in place before I'll get that going. Alright, so people of Moruga, people of Tableland, people of surrounding districts, the road to January. The road to January, CSEC Maths, January 2021, and we're also looking at June 2021 as well. So if you're interested, you or anybody that you care about, then WhatsApp 293-5712 to get all the relevant details. You'll see the little dialog box below the screen on the Facebook page, on the Facebook post. Send me a message. You can go to the Facebook page, Hume Maths, and send me a message as well. All right? And of course, you'll get all the information and you'll be able to sign up and whatnot. And of course, for the people who doing AdMats, stick around. We have something special coming for you as well. So this is it. We have come to the close of the analytical aspect of the election selection. I am waiting now for the EBC to release the final list of electors, and then we will go a little further into, I'll probably just do the top 7 of the marginal constituencies, the constituencies that in my view would actually decide the election one way or the other. And we'll look at just the raw figures. We'll count the votes, we'll get a sense of how do you think it swing, etc., etc., etc. All right? So look out for that tentatively. All right? And as I say all the time, stay in touch, stay tuned, spread the word. We have plenty more coming your way.